Charles Oliveira is trying to set up a mat return, but first he needs to get behind Gamrot's inside leg and underneath his hips. But Gamrot prevents this by framing with his shin, so as Oliveira lifts, he was unable to clear Gamrot's feet and drop him on his hip. When they land, Oliveira's balance is pretty weak in this direction, and if he's not careful, Gamrot can drive his shoulders forward with this whizzer and reap this leg to counter with the Harai Goshi. Oliveira quickly addresses this by stepping out to strengthen his base in that direction. You may notice that Gamrot only has one leg and one arm, keeping himself off the ground. He has a whizzer with his other arm to stop Oliveira from taking his back. You can imagine him like a table with only two legs, so in order to stay standing, he's leaning into Oliveira. So Oliveira does something brilliant. He runs in a circle around him to take away that base of support for Gamrot to lean against, and it breaks him down. Eventually, Gamrot transitions to a headquarters position. One of the advantages of this is that he has a really wide base, so it's difficult for Oliveira to pull him to the side to break him down to a hip. But the obvious disadvantage is that it leaves a big hole for Oliveira to insert one of his hooks. At this point, the biggest mistake Gamrot made here was keeping his hand on the mat rather than using it to hand fight. The arm above his shoulder is the one Oliveira will use to sink in the choke, and the one below is his control arm. Gamrot needs to monitor Oliveira's choking arm at all times while working his escape, and this is where Oliveira's control arm comes into play. He starts to reach for Gamrot's wrist from behind. If he can get a hold of it, it becomes much easier to strip this grip and free his choking arm. So Gamrot released the grip to prevent that. But now, he isn't defending the choking arm at all, and Oliveira immediately shot it through. Now Gamrot brings his other arm into the hand fight, but it's way too late because the choking arm is already cupping his shoulder, where it's much more difficult to defend. Oliveira locks up the figure 4 and the body triangle, and many would call this a neck crank because it's not under his chin, but that's not entirely true. When Oliveira rotates toward his choking arm and downward, it pushes Gamrot's mandible bone into his carotid arteries. That's why this is called a mandible rear naked choke, and Gamrot will go unconscious if he doesn't tap or escape.